Hey guys, today we're back here with another theHunter Call of the Wild video. We are back here on Scotland, and on this occasion we're gonna be going over the best theories on how to spawn a Wild Haggis that we've seen on this community, from let's say the less likely to be correct to the most likely to be correct. We already know the Wild Haggis is 100% real inside the game. There's plenty of evidence to support their existence, including multiple pictures, harvest screens, even some clips, and of course official confirmation already. But the question is, what do we have to do in order to spawn one? Is there even something in particular you can do in order to spawn a Wild Haggis? There are many different theories, many of them make a lot of sense, but of course only one of those theories, or potentially the combination of a couple, is what will actually lead us to figure out how to spawn a Wild Haggis. In theHunter Call of the Wild Haggis is proven to be by far the most elusive creature on the entire game. We know they work very similar to the rest of the species, in the sense that we know they have feed zones. Apparently they don't have any rest times or drink times. They may have some, but so far not a single drink time or rest time has been discovered. And we also know that they have a scoring system which works exactly the same as with any other animal. They have a minimum silver score, a gold score, and a diamond score, so they are actually able to spawn as diamonds. These Haggis also have multiple fur variations. At the moment we know they have at least 6, there are probably more, but only 6 have been posted so far. And they are the Bald Calico, the Crested Blonde, the Bald Spotted, the Crested Brown, the Furry Char Cinnamon, and the Furry Tawny. As you can see, the difference between these variations is pretty significant, because it's not only the color of the fur that changes, it's also the length of the fur and the color of the skin, giving us some very different variations. Another very interesting thing about the Haggis is that based on this picture, they only have one organ, which is the stomach, and as you can see it is shaped exactly like the Haggis dish we know in real life, which is funny. But apparently you don't even need to be accurate and hit this organ in order to get a full score, because it has been said by Ben, who's one of the people that worked on designing this creature, that hitting a Haggis once will be enough to kill it and get the full score. I'm honestly glad that is the case, because imagine if there was a chance of actually poaching a Haggis by not hitting their stomach. It would suck. I mean, you can probably still poach it if you use a weapon that is unethical for class 2 species, but at least you don't have to be too accurate with your shots. So far there have been approximately 15 Haggis killed. This is based on all the information that has been gathered so far by some members of this community, which I'm definitely gonna mention because their efforts to gather information has been very important to make this video a lot easier to make. So first of all, shout out to Banana Tiger, who's the creator of the Hagginomicon, which is a document compiling most of the information that has been shared, found, and speculated about the Wild Haggis in the official theHunter Discord. As you can see, it shows a lot of information about the Haggis, so it's very useful, and I also wanna shout out everyone who has contributed by collecting or sharing information, and that have made a document like this one possible. Alright guys, now that we already went over all the important information about the Haggis, we are actually gonna start talking about the theories. We know the Wild Haggis is a very rare spawn, and based off some of the official information we have gotten so far, it is safe to assume their spawning mechanics are very different to the ones we are familiar with. Grinding them like you would grind a great one by just killing a lot of animals doesn't seem to be the right approach, because pretty much every single person who has gotten a Haggis so far has been just randomly honing around their map without really paying attention to the details. They were just exploring the map, maybe doing some missions, shooting some animals here and there, and suddenly they happened to stumble across a Wild Haggis. For example, the first person to kill a Haggis is called Stacy on Discord, and she was just starting to do the first missions. She went to unlock the first watchtower, then she went to the first outpost, shooting a few animals in the process, and after finishing the first 2 missions and heading towards the area where you start the third one, she happened to stumble across the Haggis, just like that. She didn't do anything special, she just played the game, casually. So of course, hearing her experience, the first theory that may come to your mind is that the Wild Haggis is possibly a very random spawn that maybe can show up at any given moment with an extremely low probability. And especially after also reading the accounts of some of the other very lucky people. They all have had very similar experiences, just roaming around their maps, some of them doing missions, others just hunting, but the point is, they weren't doing anything special, or at least not intentionally. We can assume that finding the Haggis comes down to simply be at the right spot at the right time, basically pure luck. Maybe, as I said, it's just an incredibly rare spawn that can spawn at any given moment, but fortunately we already know that that is most likely not the case, because it has been stated, also on the official theHunter Discord, that there are conditions involved that have never been used for an animal before, which tells us the spawn of a Haggis cannot be entirely random. There's definitely something these players have done unintentionally that ended up triggering the spawn of their Haggis. We've also been told by Ben that they try to give us a mission animal, but on a different style this time. So we know it's some kind of mission animal that doesn't really spawn when completing the missions, because we know there are people with Haggis that haven't completed a single mission, and we also know that there are some conditions that have to be met in order to potentially trigger the spawn of a Haggis. We can only speculate on what these possible conditions could be, but the next theory definitely makes more sense than the last one. What if spawning a Wild Haggis is actually related to the missions in some way? One of the theories is that maybe some of the dialogues you hear through some of the main story missions could be hinting in some way towards the method to spawn a Haggis. For example, on one of the first missions, we get a brief description of the Haggis, it mentions how rare they are, and it also mentions that in just a few days we'll join the ranks of the truly legendary. Is that a hint towards something? Is that a hint towards maybe having to spend a few in-game days on the map before having the chance to spawn a Haggis? In my opinion, this piece of dialogue could be in fact hinting towards something like that, but that doesn't explain why, for example, Stacy got her Haggis on her first day playing the map, which was also a case of some of the other players that also happened to get a Haggis fairly quickly. They certainly didn't play for multiple in-game days because I believe a full in-game day is something like 6 hours in real life. Maybe less, but it's definitely a few hours. So yeah, this could be some sort of a clue, but I don't think it is making a reference to literally having to spend a few in-game days on the map. Another interesting thing that is mentioned throughout the missions is that the Wild Haggis is a carnivore and that they love eating deer. This was brought up to me by Hell's Hunting, and her theory is that maybe this is a hint towards possibly having to kill a deer in order to spawn one. This is a very interesting theory because if we pay attention to the codex of a few of the people who have gotten a Haggis, you'll notice that all of them actually happen to kill at least one deer. This could mean something. Maybe one of the required conditions is that you have to shoot and claim at least one deer species in combination with other factors. It has even been suggested by some members of this community that maybe leaving dead deer as bait could work to attract the Haggis. Could that be one of the factors? Maybe, and I think it is definitely worth giving it a try, but talking with some of the people who have already gotten a Haggis, some of them are fairly certain that they haven't left a single animal unclaimed. Maybe they forgot about shooting a deer and not claiming it at some point, or maybe they actually harvested every single kill they had. It is impossible to know for sure, but I would say this theory is certainly interesting and is worth giving it a try. The next theory, however, not only could work in combination with the last one, but it would explain why some people have been getting their Haggis while doing missions and spending some good time on the map. We've talked about this on the last video, there have been many mentions of the word Delusional inside the official Discord, especially by BB, so the theory regarding this is that maybe you have to spend a certain amount of time without sleeping in game in order to potentially trigger the spawn of a Haggis, most likely in combination with other factors. Some of the players that already got the Haggis claim to have spent a good time without sleeping in game before spawning the Haggis, while some others do remember resetting the time before spawning their Haggis, although it is possible they happened to reset the time once the Haggis was already on the map. I think this is a very interesting theory that could definitely lead us in the right direction, and especially because we know that time seems to be an important factor. I mean, let's take a look at this poem that was recently posted on the official theHunter Discord to possibly give us some hints. The poem goes, "You won't see one through until after number 2. Hats off to those who do, but there's still more for you. There's no rhyme or reason, nor perfect time nor season, no point nor wind direction, just keen hunter perception. And time, and time." The emphasis on the word time clearly indicates that time is in some way important when it comes to hunting this creature. It also mentions that you won't see one through until after number 2. What does that mean? Apparently the number 2 has a lot of significance when it comes to this, because a couple days ago we also got an official post on social media, basically giving us a close look at the Haggis, showing us the running animation as well, but what's truly interesting about this post is that again, it says, it's extremely rare, some say it's not even true, but if you're on a mission, maybe you will see it too. They mention the word mission and they mention the number 2 again. If you already played the main storyline, you'll know that the mission number 2 is the mission on which you are tasked with hunting the Wild Haggis. The Wild Haggis you hunt in the mission ends up being fake, but going back to what the poem says, you won't see one through until after number 2. Is that a reference to the second mission? Does that mean that one of the requirements to spawn a Wild Haggis is that you have to complete the second mission? I would say it's very possible. I would say this riddle is most likely hinting towards that. And then the rest of the poem says, "Hats off to those who do," possibly making reference to the people who already got a Haggis, but there's still more for you. Now we know it is most likely possible to obtain a second Wild Haggis after getting the first one. It was confirmed by Ben apparently. So are the third and the fourth lines on this poem a reference towards you being able to eventually get a second Haggis? Maybe, but it could also be a reference towards the people that didn't spawn a Haggis shortly after completing the second mission, saying that there's still a way to get it. This leads me to believe that completing the second mission is actually some sort of a trigger, but it doesn't guarantee the spawn of a Haggis. Maybe it just has a very slim chance of actually directly triggering the spawn. That is a possibility. And if you don't happen to be one of the lucky ones, which would be pretty much the majority of the people, there's still probably a way to obtain a Haggis in some way. The same way that people who spawn their Haggis throughout the missions would get their second. And if that is the case, I would say it is possibly something quite random, because the rest of the poem says, there's no rhyme or reason, no perfect time or season, no point or wind direction, just keen hunter perception. And then it puts very strong emphasis on time. To me, what this means is that there's at least a certain degree of randomness when it comes to spotting these Haggis. There's not an exact way to get it. Maybe the triggers are different for each player. Maybe each player has to do different things in order to spawn a Haggis, and the system that determines this for each person is entirely random. Thor explained why a few days ago Penn mentioned that there are things that would be impossible for us to guess. It's a system that has never been used in the game before. My theory, and again this is just a speculation, is that maybe there are two different methods to spawn a Haggis. One method is tied to the missions in some way, as I said, maybe it is a random chance after completing the second mission, and the other method would be something very random, with random conditions that would make possible to get a Haggis at any time while just playing the game. We could even continue speculating and say that one of the two methods works to spawn the Haggis that has longer left legs, and the other method works for the Haggis that has longer right legs, because we know that these two variants actually spawn in game. I was discussing this theory with Hell's Hunting, just sharing ideas, and to me, this honestly makes a lot of sense. So it's definitely something to think about. We are probably very wrong, to be honest, but it is fun. It is fun to speculate. And I gotta say, another very interesting theory is that we know the Wild Haggis has feed times, and each of their feed times lasts exactly 2 hours. No one has discovered any rest time, and as far as I know, no one has discovered more than one feed zone for their Haggis. So what if the Haggis only has one feed time in your map and it remains hidden for the rest of the day? Meaning you have to find it within that short time window or otherwise you would never see it. That is definitely another possibility, because think about it, the map is huge, and that is even if they only spawn on the top 2/3 of the reserve. So even if the spawn of the Haggis isn't nearly as rare as we think, and even if they are guaranteed to spawn on your map, you'll still be very hard to find it within that specific time window with how much space there is to cover. In that case, our best approach would be to take this map as reference, by the way, big shout out to Funky Monkey for keeping it updated, and look around these areas at different times, try different time windows, and cross your fingers. That would be pretty much the only approach. So in conclusion, there are many theories that could be leading us in the right direction, but we are never gonna know for sure because they are probably never gonna explain us exactly how they work, which I really hope is the case because it is fun to have this kind of mystery in game. Something that is very hard to obtain and that forces you to take a completely different approach in comparison with the great ones, for example. No grinding involved, just explore the map, hunt around, especially around the areas where we know there have been Haggis killed, and at some point you will probably have the luck to see Haggis. Basically just play, spend time on the map. Now guys, that is gonna be it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget, if you enjoy this kind of content, please consider subscribing to the channel, it would help a lot. So thank you for watching and see you next time.